I'm going to show you some techniques on how to use the Pure Color Artisan Cocoa Butters and Brilliant Powders in using paintbrush techniques for the chocolate molds. So we're going to start out with a mold here we'll be demonstrating on, but what I like to do first is I use my molds start out very clean, dust-free, and I like to pre-coat my mold with a very thin layer of cocoa butter. I mean, so thin, you actually, it's difficult to see as it gets on. You may say, well, why do you do that? Well, I find using a natural colorants is the colorant, artisan cocoa butter, combined with the brilliant powder and the tempered chocolate creates a lovely shine when the chocolates are unmolded. Each day when I start making chocolates, we melt our cocoa butters in a crock pot. This is just a simple kitchen one. You want to take it up the water to 86 degrees, and then you can turn your crock pot on low. And then you keep your bottles in the water bath the whole time you're making your chocolates to keep them at an even temperature. What I'm doing is I'm just lightly shaking my bottle of green cocoa butter. I actually like to use parchment paper as part of my workspace. It's just easier to clean up. And I'm going to gently apply a little cocoa butter right there. I use standard brushes. You just want to make sure that you clean and sterilize after each use. But as you can see, I'm just going to load up my paintbrush. And it has a similar consistency of possibly acrylic paint, is what I think. So I'm going to show you on some brush techniques. Right now I'm just going to lightly brush a single coat of colorant. And I'm going to let the camera take a close in to see what this looks like. Okay, we're going to do 6 today. So I'm going to come back and just paint these for demonstration purposes. And this technique that I'm going to show you today on the pears is a technique that I actually coat the mold twice with the cocoa butter brush, and it gets a very transparent stained glass look. So I'm just going to come around to my mold a second time, very thin brush strokes. And your goal is not to have the cocoa butter pool. And I'll let them take a quick shot in to see what this looks like on the second coat. Now we're going to let these dry, and when we come back, we're going to apply the brilliant powder to the cocoa butter pears. We're going to apply our brilliant powder, and I like to use a sable brush for this technique because the powder itself is quite delicate, and all you do is make a very light swoosh on the colored cocoa butter. And the trick is not to make it so thick where it pools, because it can make pockets in chocolate. So if you find that there's a little much, just spray it out with an air canister. That's that. Just to show you another technique on a brush technique with the colored cocoa butters. What I'm doing is just pouring out my cocoa butter, and for this technique I'm going to be using 3 colors, orange, red, and yellow. Just give the bottles a quick shake. Now what I'm going to be doing is mixing this up so the color distributes differently on the brush. And then I'll be making one swipe on the mold. And then we're going to come back after it's dried and do a second swipe. And then we're actually going to etch. So here I'm just loading up my brush. I want to make sure I get all the different colors somewhere on the brush. And I'm just taking my brush and I'm using one stroke to cover the mold. This technique is going to, the finished product is going to look like a mosaic. And when the cocoa butter is actually dried, we're going to come back and etch into the cocoa butter. Now I'm going to come back and do a second stripe. And really this is just to make sure that this mold has got enough color on it to make an interesting etching pattern. Let you zoom in on that. Let's take a look at it. And from here, we're going to let this dry. But we don't want the cocoa butter to pool, so we're going to turn this upside down. The next step in this technique is we're going to actually etch through some of the cocoa butter, and I'm using just a tip of a brush. And as you know, molds are very easily damaged, so you want to make sure you don't etch and actually etch the mold. We're just trying to etch through the cocoa butter. So I'm just going to do a little design in each of these. And I'll tilt this up so you can see. The next step is we're actually going to dust these molds with the gold brilliant powder. And the gold will deposit in that etched area, and so when we actually lay down the tempered chocolate, it's going to look like grout in a mosaic pattern. Again, I'm just using my sable brush. I just gently dust my molds. And again, you don't want to have excess powder because it will create pockets in the chocolate. So this one I have a little too much. Any excess, you can just We're going to show you another technique, and I'm going to combine a brush technique and an airbrush. So I'm going to put out some white cocoa butter, and for here, I'm just going to flick this on to the mold to get a splatter effect. And it's very simple. You can use gloves or a toothbrush. And the goal is not to get the whole mold covered, but just enough to create a splatter effect. And normally I would do this not upright, so you could actually see. Next we're going to apply with an airbrush, and I am using a top feeder airbrush with an airbrush compressor, and I'm just putting a little in my lid, and you want to test it to make sure you've got paint coming out, and I'm just going to go up and down each row. Add a little more paint. And if you want a little darker color, you can just add another squirt. And there we go.